Welcome, everyone. We're just going to let people come into the room. I'm so glad to see you all. Happy New Year. This is our January 2024. How did that happen? Office hours. And people are still coming into the room, but you probably all know me. I'm Dr. Laura Markham, and you probably, if this is your first office hours, you don't, but otherwise you may know Candace Kilbieski, who's going to wave to you here, who is our chief admin moderator on our Facebook groups, and also Heidi. There you are, Heidi. Hi, could you wave to everybody? Heidi's also one of our moderators. And if you know you're going to be asking a question, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, and Candace will be keeping the queue. We give preference to people who have not been able to ask a question so far, recently. And I do have one pre-submitted question. Candace, should I start with that one while we get the queue together? What should we do here?
Yes, please.
Okay, then that's what we'll do. So this first question is about lying. This mom says that her daughter has always been a deeply feeling kid who has struggled with self-regulation, and they've come a long way with that, but that she seems to lie a lot. And there's no example of what lying is done. These pre-submitted questions, usually it's people cannot ask the question because they're in a time zone that makes it hard for them to ask. So I can't really ask the person to tell me an example of lying, but this parent is concerned about the lying and is also concerned that this child will do things like take chewing gum from the pantry when mom has already said no chewing gum. The mom is worried about, this is my word, dishonesty, but basically lying, and the word the mom is using is sneaky, and is worried about whether this is problematic, right? Like, is this a sign of something terrible is what the mom is asking. When does that become a problematic thing? And then secondly, how do you address it with a child without developing shame, but obviously wanting to stop the behavior? And there's a final thing that's important here. This mom says that she sees that her daughter, who is 8 now, is developmentally normal, socially fine, but sometimes seems to misinterpret social cues. So she will misinterpret a friend's actions or behaviors in a way that seems a little, what the mom says is slightly paranoid. Not in a pathological way, quote unquote, but slightly paranoid. So I'm interpreting that. I think this is a really important point. I'm interpreting that as meaning this is a child who has an overdeveloped sense of threat, is worried about what the friend's behavior or action might signify and overreacts to it. So, you're not paranoid if someone's really following you, right? So, this child who the mother is saying might be slightly paranoid. Well, we're going to assume that the behavior of the friends isn't actually signifying what the child thinks it's signifying, but the child is somehow overreacting to it. She thinks that this behavior or action from her friend is somehow signifying something that the mother thinks it isn't. So I would say that's an overdeveloped sense of threat. I'd say it's very common when you have a highly sensitive person that they're always trying to read the room. And sometimes they read things into the room that are not actually, if you check the facts, are not actually there. But the child or the adult sees signals that they're overreacting to and feeling like it's a threat, right? And if that's the case, if somebody has that overdeveloped sense of threat, it's entirely possible that that person might see things as a threat, like their parents' rules, or when the parent says, you can't have chewing gum, and they really want that chewing gum, they might sneak to get the chewing gum. And then the parent says, did you take the chewing gum? And the child says, no. And there's the lie. They're Gandhi said, what about me was so unsafe that you had to lie to me about this? So when we then respond to the child having transgressed, and every child will push the boundaries and transgress and do something we've asked them not to do. Every child will do that sometimes. So when this child, let's say, taking her example, takes the chewing gum and then lies about it to mom, and we don't know what mom's reaction is, but mom is saying here, how do I bring in consequences? So it sounds like this mom thinks that there might be some response to the child that will be a consequence to having lied that will stop the child from lying or from sneaking the gum. So if that is an unpleasant consequence or even if disappointing, forget the consequences, just disappointing the parent is an unpleasant consequence for the child, right? The child could easily want desperately to preserve that positive relationship with the parent and lie. No, I didn't take the gum, mom. That's the origin of lying, right? Which is why we always say to the child, it sounds like you wish you hadn't taken the gum, right? We never set them up to lie to us. We say, I know you took the gum, right? We don't set them up that they'll be tempted to lie. We just say, it wasn't okay to take the gum. I asked you not to have the gum. So there's so many different pieces of this, but I would say in general, the frame that I would use to look at lying is what is our response? Is the child feeling shamed? Are they feeling like are we punishing them? Are we consequencing them? Are we simply withdrawing our approval from them? Lying's not okay with me. All children will try lying. Most adults, studies show, lie a little bit. They lie to the telemarketer. They lie to their friend about why they can't go to that meeting. They lie to their mother-in-law. There's research on this that people lie. And we would like to be in a world where people don't lie. And we certainly don't want our child lying to us. It is not, to me, a sign of a problem that a child lies. It is something to talk about. If you know your child has lied to you, what you say is, I guess you wish you didn't take the gum. I guess you wish this. And it sounds like you really don't want to tell me that you took the gum. I wonder, what do you think I'm going to say about you taking the gum? And we want to explore that. How do you think I'll feel when you take the gum? And the kid might say, you'll be mad at me. You won't let me have screen time later, whatever. So that would be a good reason for them to lie to you, right? But I think the consequence of lying to you is trust. It's about broken trust. And that's what you say to your child. You're not imposing some consequence, which we know is punishment. It's perceived as punishment. We're actually saying to the child, there are invisible strings between your heart and mine. And if I lied to you, it would feel to you like I had cut one of those strings, wouldn't it? Like you couldn't depend on me. And when you lie to me, it works the same way. I feel like our trust gets cut. So I never want us to lie to each other. I commit to you that I will keep my promises to you. And I want you to keep your promises to me. And there will be times it'll be really, really, really tempting to lie to me. Let's talk about all those kinds of times. We want to destigmatize it at the same time that we say it's a big deal. So let's talk about it. Every time you're tempted to lie to me, all the more important that we talk about it. I will never be disappointed in you. I will always love you no matter what. And when you're tempted to lie to me or to sneak and do something I've asked you not to do, it's all the more important we talk about it. And I will never be upset at you. I will always be, we want to keep the door open, right? That your child can always come to you and say, I did this transgression. I did this thing wrong. So that they know we're always, there's nothing they can do that is beyond our love for them. So I don't know, I'm hoping this answers the question of the mom who asked. It might, it's such an interesting and big topic that there may even be more follow-up questions on it later, but I guess we'll get to our cue, and we'll, sorry, I need to open my chat so I can see the cue. and we'll start with Megan. Megan, if you could unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hi. My question is around my 9-year-old daughter. I've noticed like a handful of times in the last 8 months, situations where she's with a friend and I overhear her say something kind of unkind to her friend in a way that she thinks she's being really funny. And I'm not really supposed to be hearing, like I'm either driving them in the car or I'm in the kitchen cooking and she's in the living room with her friend. An example is she was playing a game with her friend and I was in the kitchen cooking and I heard her laughing, saying, ha ha ha, that's the stupidest move you could have possibly made.
Oh,
And in my mind, it's some confidence insecurity going on for her, but I'm unsure how to address it in a way that's respectful to her. And I don't want her to feel like I'm listening to all her conversations with her friends. And it's not all the time. She has a really good group of friends. It's not like she's losing friendships over this, but I've just heard it maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 8 months.
and it's with different friends. It's not always with the same friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it is something you could bring up to her and say, when we were in the car today, I just happened to hear. I mean, they do think we disappear while we're driving. They don't really know we're actually listening. But to say, I happened to hear you say that was the stupidest thing you could have said to your friend so-and-so. Do you really think that was the stupidest thing she could have said? I mean, just like start there.
Yeah.
But not in a judgmental tone, but more like, really, was that the stupidest thing she could have said? Well, and what caused you to say that to her? But so she'll say, yeah, it was pretty stupid, Mom. She should know better. She might say, or she might say, Mom, I didn't mean it. That's just what you say when something's stupid, right? And and so again, we're being curious, we're not being judgmental, but so you wanted to give her feedback that what she said you thought was pretty lame. Is that right? Does anyone ever say things like that to you? I wonder what your friend's takeaway was. Now, the friend might have recovered. The friend also, you might be able to observe the friend suddenly got silent. We don't know what happened in the car, but right? So it might be that the friend responded in some way you could say, yeah, I can see why you thought it was a pretty lame thing to say. I'm just trying to, it's judgmental lame, but not quite as judgmental as the stupidest thing you could say. I'm just trying to back off the judgment a little bit here while still, acknowledging your daughter's perspective. And then to say, I noticed after you said it, then whatever she did, she got silent. She said something mean back. She, changed the subject, whatever she did. Did you notice that? So you're not making her wrong, but you're trying to help her notice what she's doing. Now, do you think you could do that without her feeling judged?
Maybe. She's pretty quick to shut down any conversations about stuff. And she's like, I know where you're going with this, Mom. I see right through you. So a lot of times I have to write her notes about
Huh.
stuff, but that's a little trickier to be curious via a note, I think.
It is trickier. And also it's not a back and forth conversation, right? Like, I don't
Right.
know how you begin that.
Yeah.
So the I see right through you. It's not a matter of seeing through. It's like, we're having a conversation. We should be having conversations every single day about life, right?
Yeah.
Constant conversation. So there shouldn't be any seeing through. There's no hidden agenda here,
Yeah.
right? So if she said, I see through you, you can say, what exactly do you see? I was really curious about that interaction. Like, is that a usual way kids talk to each other? What
Yeah.
would be usual reaction? Um, just now you do run the risk of having her become self-conscious the next time you're in the car,
Right.
right? It might be that instead of choosing the car, you choose a making dinner one so that she doesn't feel as self-conscious because she's maybe, that's easier for her to look up and see, oh, you're busy stirring the spaghetti and you're not actually looking at her or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, right. It might be you choose that instead of the car because the car, you're always present.
Right.
But do you think you could, I mean, I would not try to do the note. I think this would be a hard thing to talk about in a note.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think I could try. I think that's really good feedback.
And when Lauren has just pointed out that the time you choose to have the conversation with her will also matter a lot. For Lauren, bedtime's work, other people, sometimes the car when nobody else is around is a good one because then you're not looking in her eyes. She has the escape valve of not looking at you,
Yeah.
right? So I think you can pick what you think is going to work best and really don't expect to get much done in the first conversation. The first conversation is just to say, hi, notice this interaction. I was
Yeah.
curious about that. I was curious about, like, it seemed like a pretty strong thing to say to your friend. I was curious about what was going on inside you that you chose to do it. You don't have to you don't want her to feel psychoanalyzed. She's going to feel disconnected from you. You're not trying to psychoanalyze her and say, oh, you feel insecure, so you're trying to build yourself up by putting your friend down. No, you're trying to help her become more aware of something that is basically unconscious that she's doing that she probably doesn't really want to be doing if she were aware. She
Yeah.
might even feel funny about it in the moment, but then sort of block it out and keep going, which we've all done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Our next person in our queue is Marian. Marian, you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, Dr. Laura. I am calling about my 7-year-old daughter. So she's always been my like easier kid, very confident. My son, who's older, had kind of anxiety issues and things like that. She never did. And then about a year and a half ago, she got diagnosed with like a nut allergy. And it was like we had to go to the allergist. They had to tell us about an EpiPen. She did not like that. And now she's very she doesn't want to try new foods. And it's both reasonable, she has an EpiPen, and also it's affecting her. So I'm trying to navigate that. And then more recently, like in the last 2 months, she asked a friend at school to tell her a scary story, and the girl told her 3 like absolutely terrifying horror stories about kids being murdered and like fake things that she made up. But my daughter, she does not want to be alone in a room ever now. This has been like, I guess it's like a month and a half or 2 months. So, I mean, the stories are actually horrifying. So I just am wondering, I feel like the second thing kind of builds on the first thing, and but I'm just wondering what to do about maybe both of them. But the more immediate problem is the scary story thing that she keeps thinking in her head and picturing and stuff.
That's so hard. The mind has this way of replaying things that alarm us. And the mind, sometimes, I mean, the mind is trying to keep us on our toes, right? Trying to make sure we're hyper vigilant so nothing terrible could happen. My hunch is that it had never occurred to her that these horrible things could happen, quite like these horrifying things. And so when she heard them, she was like, oh my God, I have to make sure this never happens, right? And so she replays that. So I think the way you would talk about that is the same way you would talk about any anxiety, which is the mind is really helpful to us. It's a great tool. But when the mind takes charge, it actually doesn't have the same agenda. It doesn't have the agenda of our well-being. The mind's agenda is survival. That's how it's designed. It's designed to keep us surviving so we can pass on our genes. So the mind doesn't mind if we never have a good day ever in our entire lives. The mind actually is designed to have us survive. And we have to learn to manage the mind. We have to gradually educate the mind of what the actual agenda is, which is joy and well-being and connection and love. So, and all of us can, when I say mind, sometimes I get feedback from people saying, no, as a longtime meditator, I know the mind is love. And I actually believe that the universal mind is love, not a question. But the human mind, until we educate it to tap into that universal mind, actually can think pretty small. And the pretty small is, I'm going to beat out everybody who stands between me and survival, right? So I mean, it's humans at their worst, right? So a kid, a 7-year-old, what does she know, right? Her mind is like trying to keep her alive. Her mind says, these terrible things could happen. We shouldn't be ever alone in a room. And her mind even says, well, these doctors gave me an EpiPen because they're that serious. So there's such danger out there that I could die at any moment. And of course, I'm not going to eat new foods. I'm barely going to leave the room, right? Go into new situations. That's a lot for a 7-year-old to handle, right? And the things I believe are related, and I think you pointed out that her older brother has had some challenges with anxiety. If there's anxiety is, we're all on a continuum of how hyper alert we are. And it does run in families that people tend to be more hyper alert. She wasn't so hyper alert, but these two things have pushed her towards that end of the spectrum, right? So the way I would begin talking to her about the scary stories is, your mind has seized on those scary stories as a possibility. But in fact, it's not, those are not possibilities. Those were things your friend made up. They are not going to happen to you. They're not going to happen to anybody. And I think we should find a way to put those scary stories where they belong, which is in the garbage. Now, if you have the ability to burn something outside or a fireplace or something, and you could actually even say to her, I don't really want to have her draw a picture of the scary story. She's cementing into her subconscious an image of this horrible thing, murder or something, right? So I would not suggest she draw a picture of it, which would be one way that people work on stuff like this. But PTSD practitioners would do that. They would say, we're going to bore the mind. We're going to get the mind so used to this that the mind is going to not even see this as a threat anymore, right? Your daughter doesn't have PTSD. I'm not taking in that direction, but I want you to know that you could get that advice. I'm not thinking that's where you need to go yet. I think you could just say, so there were 3 scary stories, right? What would you call these stories? 1, the stupid story of you're disparaging the stories. You're robbing them of their power. The stupid story of the XYZ, the story that would never happen of the such and such, the impossible story of the whatever. You write down what they are, or she's 7, so she can't probably necessarily write this down. And you say, we're going to burn these. Let's do it. And you do almost like it's like a little ritual or incantation where you're putting them, you go out in the yard and you have a safe place and you say, we're crumpling each of these 3 papers up. There are 3 different ones. So I would do 3 different papers and we're putting them here and let her drop a match onto them and say goodbye stories. And then she's going to say, but Mom, they're still in my mind. They're still going to come up. And you say, oh, that's normal. But your job is you have to have an antidote to them. It's like when there's if you get a rattlesnake bite, you get the antidote and then you're fine. It's the same. I wouldn't bring the rattlesnake up. That she'll get all kinds of anxiety about it. Don't do that one. But and probably antidote's the wrong word, but just something that is, you need to have the answer to that. If your mind comes up with this scary thing, you say, that's not true. She made that up. What would help you to hear? Okay, that's what you're going to say to yourself. And you even can write it down with her and put it up in her room so she sees these answers. And you say to her, I'm here to help because I've learned to manage my mind pretty well because I'm a grown-up and you'll learn too, but you're only 7, so you haven't learned yet. So anytime you think of these things, you tell me, I'll help you remember what it is you're going to say to your mind. And you're just going to basically get the mind back in order about this. And the EpiPen, I do think there's an empowering thing you can say about this, which is, a nut allergy isn't a fun thing to have, but you're safe. You've got your EpiPen. Now, the problem is she could fixate on carrying that EpiPen with her everywhere, right? That's the problem, is if she gets anxious and has to always have it with her and can't feel safe without it. But I think you can just say, you can see it as like a power object, like a totem. You have your power object. It will always keep you safe. You've always got that recourse. It's not a problem. And it's always fine to ask, this looks delicious. I have a nut allergy. Can you tell me if there are any nuts in it or what's in it or whatever? And just teach her like a little, again, it's almost like a little ritual she goes through to purify her food, right? So that she doesn't have to be alarmed about it, about trying something new. And then the final thing I would say about both of these is laughter. The way we manage anxiety is laughter. It really helps to disable stuff. It's super healthy. So anytime you can I would read the article on the AHA Parenting website about bees, the child who's phobic about bees. read it and see how you could apply that to the nut question and even the horror story question, and see if there are ways that you could get her specifically laughing about either of those things. You know, the EpiPen, it's going to be a little bit part of her self-image.
And I guess
But
the EpiPen, she's actually more afraid of the having to get a shot. She's more afraid of the EpiPen than the reaction.
has she ever used the EpiPen? Have you ever actually used it?
No, she's never, yeah. Never.
It's not exactly, my daughter has an EpiPen. My daughter's allergic to bee stings,
Oh.
and hated shots when she was a kid. She's one of those highly sensitive kids that really reacted to shots, because some kids are physically more, you know, we had to go through the whole give her Tylenol before the shot and numbing cream and all that. I would say you could even attach some numbing cream in there, you know, that she could use with the EpiPen, and you could just say, you know, it's not a big deal, the EpiPen. It's not like a regular shot, because it actually isn't. And maybe, I don't think you would necessarily want to go through a fake shot, but I think that, do you think that would help?
Yeah, yeah, we haven't really talked about that much, so I could definitely try that.
All right. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. I don't see another cue here, but I do see some great comments. And I don't see any hands raised. Is anybody waiting to ask a question? Candace, I don't know if you have anybody else in the wings, but otherwise I'll take Sarah's question. Good.
Dr. Lara, Candace just got kicked out, and I'm not the host today, so you'll need to let her back in.
Thank you. First of all, I'm admitting Candace, and secondly, I think I just made you a co-host, Heidi. Let me see. There we go. So you're both co-hosts. Okay.
Okay,
Great.
I see that now. Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so I'm going to call on Sarah G. To unmute yourself.
Hi, sorry. I hope I'm not like jumping the queue because I arrived a little bit late, so I didn't know what the process was. But I have sort of a weird question of you know, just graduated the 12-week course. We're very much still in process with everything. But one issue I've had is I have two kids, son who's 5, daughter who's 3, and they will have been doing this thing lately where they'll get into like hyper mode with each other, where they're just like a ball of like roughhousing, giggling, whatever. And it'll happen like at a time when we like need to be getting out the door or need to be getting to bed, etc. And what I'm struggling with is like how to do something as simple as get their attention in a peaceful way. Because like what happens is I'll talk to them at various tones of voice, get completely ignored. Sometimes I'll clap my hands. Sam really hates that. You know, I'll get up in their face, sometimes physically between them, still ignored. So I just like, I'm trying to figure out how to not lose my SHIT when I'm being just straight up ignored by my
So
children.
first of all, it is completely age appropriate for them to do this, right? And especially what I have noticed is bedtime. You know, kids will get out of the bath and they just, I don't know, you know, it's like when you give a puppy or a dog a bath and they suddenly they're just wriggling and shaking water all over the place. Kids seem to be the same way often. Somehow with the buildup of stress hormones in their body, by the end of the day, they get out of the bath with this new energy and they go crazy and they feed off each other. I don't know about first thing in the morning, but it makes sense they'd be full of energy first thing in the morning too. But this feeding off each other thing is actually wonderful. It means they're connected in a really good way. But it can be hard to insert yourself in the middle of that, because the last thing they want to do is buckle down and do what you're asking them to do, to get their shoes on to leave the house or get their pajamas on or whatever else they're trying, you know, that you would like them to do. So I think you first, you know, so remember, there's always a 3-part process to everything we do with our kids. The first one is to calm ourselves down. And you might need to say to yourself, yes, they are ignoring me. That doesn't mean they're bad kids. It doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong. I'm not a bad mom. It's going to be okay. This is normal behavior for a 3 and 5-year-old. And, just like talk yourself off the cliff, take a few deep breaths. And also remind yourself you're not powerless here. Being ignored, most of us feel powerless when we're ignored. And therefore we come down like a sledgehammer and we start screaming because it's coming out of our sense of powerlessness, our fear. But you aren't powerless. So part of the antidote for you in this would be to remind yourself that you're not powerless. You do have things you can do here. It's okay. They're going to get to bed. And also for both of the routines where they do this, the morning and the evening, I would back those routines up by 15 minutes and give yourself some extra time, number one. And I would use that extra time to connect so that when you're trying to get out of the house in the morning, you're really connected to them. So it's a lot easier. You haven't lost the connection. So you notice I said there's a 3-step process. The one is to calm yourself down. The second is to connect. So the connection happens in that extra time. And you're making sure that you're insinuated in the middle of the whole process of getting ready to leave the house, or the process of getting their PJs on and getting ready for bed or whatever. Because if you think you can actually just quickly answer that text from somebody, you can't. You actually can't. You have to stay engaged with them at every step in the process, and it will help them to not ignore you. The third thing we always do is coach, right? Where we are, instead of just resorting to yelling or threats or punishments, we're trying to help our kids be their best selves by meeting their needs and by connecting before we direct them, right? So the coaching part of this would be you said, how do you do this peacefully, to interrupt it? If you have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old who are racing around the house naked after their bath and won't get ready for bed, I would, you said you can't, like, you're talking to your blue in the face. They're not going to listen to you talk. I would actually reach down, pick up the 3-year-old who's going to be wriggling and shouting in your arms and say, let's calm down, let's calm down. And the 5-year-old's going to be running to you and say, no, we're playing, or whatever he's going to do. And you're just like, actually, we're done playing now. It's time. Now, notice I'm lowering my voice. I'm trying to calm them down. They're probably going to be screaming. If you need to raise your voice, you can do that. You're not yelling at them. You're saying, it's a limit, right? Nope. We're done yelling. We're done playing. We're choosing the book we're going to read. Let's go. And you're actually turning and moving into the room where you're going to get the clothes for the 3-year-old, right? And the 5-year-old, I guarantee you, is going to follow you. So the most important thing here is you maintaining your center and being completely affirming to them. You can be like, you are so excited right now, and it's time to get ready. You want the blue pajamas or the red pajamas, whatever. And so your ability to stay calm and to connect is always the bottom line of being able to get kids to listen to you, to obey you. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
You look very unconvinced, Sarah.
The part that's unconvincing for me is the trying to move things 15 minutes ahead, because that's something that we're already struggling with. It's something I've tried to do at bedtime, and it seems to just extend the chaos even longer. So that's another struggle, which I won't get into, but that's the struggle that we have, is it's tough getting to bed, and then they don't get enough sleep, and then it's tough waking up in the morning. So kind of have this struggle with not enough sleep, that it's hard to then break because of that resistance at bedtime. But
well, all the more important to start bedtime earlier. Based on what you said, I would say start at half an hour earlier. And you said the wildness just keeps going on, but do you do roughhousing earlier in the day?
Try to. It's very hard because I work until 6 o'clock.
Yeah,
and
of course. When are you gonna do it? Yeah.
So
when you first
I encourage my husband is more the roughhouser in the family, and you know, so I've tried to encourage him to instigate that like before dinner since he's home a little bit earlier. Sometimes it happens, sometimes not. It's been tough because we've been sick lately, so
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Just when you get a
work in
routine
progress.
down.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I really want to advocate for roughhousing when kids have a hard time settling down at night. Not roughhousing
Yeah.
then, because then they're revved up, but roughhousing earlier. And maybe there's a way that you and your husband can work on that. And I guarantee, not I guarantee, I can't imagine you wouldn't see a change. I have never seen that fail, that when you do roughhousing earlier, kids actually get some of that adrenaline and stuff out of their system. And so later they're actually more able to calm down.
If they haven't been able to roughhouse earlier and suddenly it's bedtime and they decide it's roughhouse time,
Mhm, mhm.
what do you recommend in that case? Because that's something we've run into a
I
couple of
think,
times recently.
yeah, I think I mean, there are kids. I have heard there are children that you could roughhouse with at that point who would then calm down. You could try that once as an experiment. That does not work with all kids, I will say right now. Many
Yeah.
kids, you roughhouse and they're just not going to be able to stop. They're revved up and they can't stop. So you make everything worse, but you've at least experimented. But I do know that it works for some kids. Parents have tried it. If your kids are not those kids and you end up in this position, you make a mental note. You're in the breakdown lane. It's like when you're in the breakdown lane in anything. Oops, we didn't do the preventive maintenance we should have done. Now we're in the breakdown lane. Tomorrow we're going to handle this differently. That's your mental note that you're going to talk to your husband about it after bedtime. But at that moment, then you say, all the more important that I stay calm and connect with them. And you can connect with them even though they're so excited about that incredibly enlivening feeling of racing around with each other and being crazy wild. Their connection with you is more important to them than anything. And if you connect with them in a delighted in them way that says, let me see my rambunctious bunny, and you grab your 5-year-old to you and you hold him and you say, I know you just want to play. So, but he might sort of be like not able to settle down just from your loving embrace. But if you sweep that into a little dance move, say, let's dance a little bit, but it's not a crazy dance. It's a calmer dance. You're basically transforming his energy, moving it to a different level through your connection. We're always drawing on our connection with our kids to help them make transitions. And this would be a good example of one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. And by the way, I'm not able to keep up with what's going on in the chat, but thank you all for putting in suggestions for each other in the chat. And I know that every question that's being asked, somebody has gone through this and might have good suggestions for you. So the next person in the queue is Francis. Francis, if you could unmute yourself. Francis, I don't see your face. I do see your hand up. Are you there and trying to unmute yourself? I'm going to move on to Margaret, and we'll hopefully have Francis next. Margaret, if you could unmute yourself.
Hi, Dr. Laura.
Hi.
I'm looking in the chat box because Francis is chatting. Should I?
You should ask your question, and Francis will be next.
Okay. So my question is in regards to an older child. So my daughter.
An older child?
An older child. Yeah, my daughter is 13.
Okay.
And so what's on my mind? And I wasn't going to ask this today, and then I thought, well, why don't you ask this? When I think I'm doing a good job of self-regulating in general, but some of the teenage like sassiness I find very triggering, like when it's so, I find it mean-spirited, and it really like takes my breath away, like sometimes some of the things that are said, and I want to be able to respond in a way that is not shaming or blame, like shaming, especially like, oh, I would never say it, or I don't know what to say in the face of like this meanness, like, swearing at me or like saying something like I have never even said. Like that's what kind of shocks me sometimes when you hear something that you've said. It's like, oh, but when it's something, like one time she said, screw you to me. And I was floored. And so I'm asking, what do I do in that situation?
So the first thing you do, if you notice when you're triggered and you calm yourself down, right? You do not need to be correcting her immediately. If when you correct her immediately, you're coming from a place of, emotional devastation that's going to cause you to just lash out at her. Obviously, there's no reason you need to do that at that moment, right? So you're going to calm yourself down. The part of how you calm yourself down is you remind yourself that it's sort of like dealing with a toddler. Toddlers don't know things like screw you, but they do know things like I hate you. 3-year-olds will say, I hate you. I want a new mommy, right? It's not unusual. And does the 3-year-old actually want a new mommy? Does the 3-year-old actually hate you? No, the 3-year-old is saying the worst thing they can conceive of to let you know just how angry they are at this moment, right? And your 13-year-old, when she says that to you, is doing exactly the same thing. And not unlike a toddler, right? Like the 13-year-old doesn't want a new mom. The 13-year-old doesn't even really get the significance of screw you. In fact, I have to just share that yesterday, someone said to me that she had used that term, specifically that term, for years before she understood what it was actually saying. She didn't realize how bad it was, what she was saying. That she grew up saying that was what people said, and she said it, right? So I do think that while you and I hear it and we're like, oh, that's terrible. That's like swearing at your mother. That actually somebody could, if the kids at school are all saying, screw you, right? That to her, it might be just like, like, oh, you're a jerk. It might not have any kind of actual extra significance for her. She doesn't even see it as swearing necessarily. She may, I'm just saying, we don't even know that. But remember, swearing is considered in our culture to be an attack. The reason it's an attack is the significance we give it, right? When somebody uses a swear word against us, we feel attacked by that. It is a form of verbal attack. That's why it's rude to swear at somebody, right? But are kids using swear words? I'm not saying it's okay for them to use swear words to us or anyone else. I'm saying that they're using it in the same way the toddler says, I hate you, the forbidden word, right? That they want to show you how mad they are. So if you can see everything from your 13-year-old as a communication, you can stop being so triggered. That doesn't mean you don't set limits on on the language she's using, but it does mean that you always start by calming yourself down and saying, this is a communication. She's really mad. If she's in fact mad, right? Which I assume she is, or she wouldn't be saying such things. So there is an article on the AHA Parenting website. It's about handling rudeness, and it gives different ages, the age frame for handling rudeness at each age. And I believe rude is in the title of it.
Okay.
So that would be a good thing to look at. But I would just say in general, your response, first you calm yourself down, and your next response is always connection and then coaching. So the connection would be to acknowledge what she's communicating. Wow. You just said screw you to me. You must be pretty upset about this. I guess you're showing me just how upset you are. Now, even that was a lot of words. You'd probably shorten that too. Wow. I guess you're using words that we would never use. I guess you're showing me how upset you are. I want to help with this, honey. Tell me more. Notice that I'm putting it right out on the table. I'm not ignoring her behavior, but I'm also not saying, don't you speak to me that way. I'm saying, I hear your communication. I hear your communication. I'm here. I'm listening. If you do that and you make a practice of that, in the beginning, it might take hours. for everybody to calm down and have then after you listen to her, because initially she'll yell at you. When you say, I'm here to help, you tell me what you're so angry about. Of course I'm angry. You're not listening. You know, she's going to just yell everything she can think of at you. And you're going to have to say, it's okay. She's talking to me. This is communication. She's a kid. She's 13 years old. This isn't the time to set limits. This is the time to connect and listen and try to understand what's happening here. And after that, you rephrase what she said. So you're really upset because you think I was unfair when XYZ. You're really upset because I told you no. You're really upset, whatever it is. You know, she's going to, believe me, they get very astute at figuring out any place we are the least acting without integrity. I guess I would say the least little bit of acting without integrity on our part, they will find, teenagers will find it. And she just made this huge leap, rewiring of the brain at age 12 to 13. That's when it happens, is age 12. So at that point, they're capable of much higher conceptual thought, and they will use it to get what they want. They will use it to express their dismay. And if we don't listen, we run the risk of walls going up. We don't need that. We can keep in communication and in fact, use these rudenesses as opportunities to get closer to them. So you can listen, you can say, it sounds like you felt XYZ. And if you can really get under the anger to what she actually felt was that you were unfair and you didn't listen and you don't care about her and you embarrassed her and all the other things, notice that the tears will start to come. She'll start to get softer because that's what's under the anger. And if she can do that and get to that point with you and you can listen and empathize, you're not analyzing her, you're just acknowledging, of course you were upset. I didn't understand that was embarrassing you when I did that or whatever. You're building a bridge there. Later, after everything's calm, after there have been hugs, after you've both gone on with your lives, maybe at bedtime, you say, you know, you were so mad at me earlier, weren't you? She says, well, yeah. You say, you were so mad, you swore at me, didn't you? And she might say, I wasn't really swearing. The kids all do that. And you can say, to me, that's swearing. It's not okay to do that in our house. I know kids say all kinds of things, but you know that's not polite conversation. And if you are mad at me, you can tell me directly and I will always listen. There's never a need to swear at me. You'll have to do that more than once probably, but you won't have to do it very many times. And I think you'll see a total, like this is the perfect time to deepen your relationship before she gets any further into the teen years. And also she'll develop more self-regulation. 13 is not nearly as hard as 16, let's say. People are all like, oh my gosh, if she's this way at 13, what's 16 gonna be? It actually gets much easier.
Yeah, that is what I think.
Yeah,
Okay,
so that's
great.
also a thing to reassure yourself about.
Yes,
It gets
I will,
easier, not
definitely.
harder. They're less regulated at 13 than any other time throughout the teen years. And if you use that time to build bridges, you're home free.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Our next person is Francis. Francis, are you with us?
Yeah, sorry about last time.
No worries.
So we are moving out of state at the end of the month from California, Colorado. I have an 11-month-old and a little over 2.5-year-old, and I'm struggling with how to tell the 2.5-year-old that we're moving, and also especially how to prepare for changing schools, because the last time she changed schools at 2, it was pretty rough. Like she was waking up and screaming inconsolable in the middle of the night. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions about that.
Oof. Well, first of all, Francis, there is an article on the AHA Parenting website about moving that talks about how to talk to kids. That's the first thing. Second thing is a 2-year-old needs something more than a conversation. A 2-year-old needs to play with it and also have a book to read about it. So you definitely want to make a book about the old house and the new house and what's going to happen that day. 2-year-olds are really, not even just 2-year-olds, kids up to the age of way beyond where you think, like 5 or 6, actually worried that they'll be left behind. I knew one kid, I think she was 7, and she was sure the family would forget the dog. And I think the dog was the stand-in for her, right? She was sure the dog would be forgotten. Children are so anxious about being left behind. So this is one of the things that you just address that anxiety head on. I'm going to be holding your hand. I'm never going to, you know, you're going to be with them every minute, you know, like they're coming with you. This is how we're going to move from, we're going to get in the car all together and drive. We're going to get on an airplane, whatever the plan is, right? And you put all this in the book. There's a book that has pictures of the old house and pictures of the new house. And if possible, pictures of the old school and pictures of the new school, a
Oh.
picture, if possible. If the child is going to be going, if your 2-year-old's going to be going to school when you first get there, like it's different if there's a summer vacation ensuing, then I would not combine the two. It would just be goodbye to everything we love, which is all outlined in the article. Goodbye, and that's part of the book. And then hello to the new neighborhood and, you know, all the great things in the new neighborhood. And if the child's then starting school in 2 or 3 months, it's not a problem to then do a different book and a different introduction to the school for that school. But if the child's leaving one school and then starting a new school a week later, then you have to include that as part of the book. And there is not the best thing to do with a new school is always to have the child gradually get used to the new school without just being left there. So working with the school on a plan that the last time that your child adjusted to a new school, it was actually really rough. And how do they help the child adjust? And what do they suggest you do? Meaning, can you sit with your child in the classroom in the beginning for the first week for, you know, X period of time? You know, maybe the first day you just go for 15 minutes. Maybe you go for half an hour, but your child leaves with you. And the next day it's twice as much time. But I'm saying a gradual, if your child had a really hard time with the adjustment the first time, a gradual transition would be a lot better for your child. So I would definitely get pictures of the teacher, a picture of the teacher to use in the new book. Or it could simply, you know, something, you might even have a whole book about the school, a second book, but basically you want it to be my new school and how great, you know, picture of the climbing thing and the play area where the blocks are and the teacher, the smiling teacher. And if possible, other kids that they would like, that they could feel comfortable with. But because teachers are the attachment figure, they'll be much more important than another kid for a 2-year-old, right? It's different if it's a 6-year-old and they've had great play dates with that other 6-year-old. They can find a peer to cling to, but a 2-year-old really just needs to know that adult will be there for them, that they can rely on that adult. And you can expect your child to cry when they're left there at some point, when they're actually left there. But what you want is to know that the teachers will soothe your child and that they have enough, your child has enough familiarity with them that it's not like complete strangers. You're not just going to go in the first day and leave your child in a strange place with people they've never seen before.
Oh, I asked the school for suggestions and they basically said it was up to me. And so,
Okay, all the better. You get to decide.
all right, I had
Love
never
that.
considered that, like just staying with her. I think I had never thought of that before, so I'll try that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
And there are other things on the website. I can't think off the top of my head about specific things. There is a how to get your child, how to leave your child at daycare. I think that would be probably the best article. Like, how do you gradually do that with a caregiver? That's more for like babies and toddlers. And then there's one about preschool. So your child's somewhere in between those two. So take a look at those articles as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Our next person in our queue, I think, is Lee. Yes, Lee. You want to unmute yourself, Lee?
Hi. So I have a
Hi.
question. Maybe a couple weeks ago, my son was playing with a friend, and the friend brought over some Legos, and my son also has a large Lego collection. And there was a mix-up, and they began to disagree about a very specific Lego piece, like whose Lego it was. And so I came, I said, okay, let's all take 3 deep breaths, and we did the deep breaths, and then I asked them both to tell, like, I didn't want to say like I'm taking it or like it's yours. I didn't want to decide it for them or anything like that. So we did deep breaths, and then I asked them both to tell me like their understanding of like the narrative of like how that Lego piece arrived, like how there became a disagreement about the Lego piece, basically, like both their perspectives, and they both told plausible stories about why it was one versus the other. And then I was like, I can't, like, I had a pretty strong suspicion that it was the friend's Lego piece. But what happened? Basically what ended up happening, I suggest, like, can maybe one of you let the other one borrow the Lego piece, and then you can both look in your collections to see, like, if you have a similar piece. But they both wanted to be the one to get to, like, they both wanted the other one to, like, let them borrow it. So yeah, so what ended up happening was that the friend's father came over and insisted that the friend leave the Lego piece here, and he was devastated. And my son was sort of like moping a bit, but not as anyway. Eventually I asked him, like, how, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how strongly do you think this is yours? And he said maybe a 3. And so okay, it's definitely the friend. So I'm just wondering how I might have navigated that situation, like when they're both disagreeing about this a specific, whether it's one kid's versus the others.
Wow. Well, first of all, Lee, I think you did a great job of navigating it, where you came up, where you let each of them, share their perspective. And you said, this is a tough problem. And maybe one solution would be that one of you can use it now, one of you can use it, one of you can be loaning it to the other, and it could have shared custody, so to speak, for a while. It probably over, most of these kinds of disputes do have short life cycles. They're immediate in the moment, but then they don't continue. Like your son was able to get to, it's a 3, as opposed, a 3 out of 10, I'm assuming, like 10 is like, it's mine. 3 is like, right. So usually what you did would, if you could get them to do it, which is hard, but would be a good way to move into the future. So I think what you did was perfect. So let's explore if there's more you could have done. And also, I don't know if you've done anything now, but if at that moment when they couldn't come to that, and the other parent appears and says, oh, well, we're going to be the ones to, take the hit here. That's harder, right? It's always harder because the other parent wants to be seen as polite or whatever, right? So
yeah, it was what really, like, tore my heart out was seeing the other kids so devastated about the situation. I was like, we gotta,
yeah. So I'm not sure if you at that point with the other parent are pretty sure that it's not your son's, you could do something like, say, talk to the parent, pull the parent aside and say, I would just like to invoke like a house rule that since there's a disagreement and it's our house, we're going to let the piece go, and we'll keep trying to sort out what happened. And maybe we can get a second piece just like it, but let's start with that. And then you could invoke that, especially if you're pretty sure it's not your kids. But also, if you're really not sure, even if you're really not sure, you could say you have the power to connect with your child enough to say, I know you feel like this is the wrong thing, that we're going to give the other child this piece, but we can get another piece. I need you to work with me on this. And you can, sometimes we ask our kids to do all kinds of things that are not like, everything from giving another kid a turn first to, go to school this morning, things that, they really don't want to do, that we don't really care if they did or not, but we're going to ask them to do it for us, because this is the right thing for the structure. I think it would have been fine to do that. Once the piece is at your house and your kid has told you it's a 3, I think there's an opportunity for great learning to happen with your child, to say,
well, then we did a repair. Like, then I said, beautiful. Okay, repair it with your friend.
And how did that turn out? What happened?
He doesn't love like any kind of repair. Like, we sort of stay away from like just say I'm sorry, but the friend was in a much better mood, like as soon as he got the piece back, and the repair went as fine as they go, basically. Um, yeah, I mean, they're fine. They're fine now. Yeah,
How old are these kids?
6.
Yeah, so they're young enough that the other 6-year-old could let go of it.
Yeah.
And so the piece was given back. There was a repair.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about it, in some ways, the not being believed and heard and understood, and having his parents say, nope, we're going to leave it here.
Yeah, right.
In some ways, that's the hard repair to make, right? How do you repair the trust? When I say that we could ask our kids to do something for us, I'm talking about really putting it on the table. Like, look, we don't know whose this is. Parents can't make a ruling on it. So because of that, we're going to pull the camera back. We're not going to like make a ruling on this. We're going to say, because we don't know and it's our house, we're going to be the ones to give. It's sort of like, you know, you would let the birthday kid go first, or you would, you know, there are those kinds of rules. Let the younger child do something. In this case, the visitor. We're gonna, because they're a visitor to our house, we're just gonna do the polite thing and let them take the piece. And I know that's hard on you, but I'm asking you to do this hard thing. It's not a rupture of trust between you and your son when you do that. It's more like you're asking them to rise to a new developmental level. And I'm not saying it would be easy for them. I think he might have responded badly if you'd asked that. And you would have said, I know it's the hardest thing ever that I'm asking you to do. You really wish you could have that piece. And we're not even sure it's not yours. It might be yours. We don't know. So this isn't the end of the discussion, but for now, your friend is leaving and they're going to take the piece because it's our house and that's what we need to do with visitors. So I do think there's a way to do that without breaking your child's trust. But I think that other 6-year-old, I think the father sort of broke their trust because they just asserted without, I mean, who knows what happened after they went home.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I love that example because it's such, you know, when you're coaching kids in social situations and you're trying to have both of them feel heard, and sometimes there are obvious answers, but often there are not, right? And sometimes kids, I'm amazed when kids feel heard, they're able to come up with answers, but moving them through the feelings to get to the answer, like your son, by the time somebody else had left without the piece, he had moved through the feelings. So then he was able to say, oh, it's only a 3, right? But he wouldn't have been able to do that probably before. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I don't see a cue here, and I don't see any hands, and I do see a hand. Candace, is there anybody else who's waiting that I'm not aware of, or should I go ahead and take Disha's question?
No, Disha.
Disha, hi.
Hi, Dr. Laura. Happy New
Hi.
Year.
Happy New Year.
So I have been noticing with my older one, who is 11 years old, that she wants to back off as soon as she sees competition. So, for example, she wanted to participate in orchestra in her middle school. So, and this is for a play. So we went for the audition, and then she got in, and next week practices begin. And now she's getting cold feet because she's like, everybody has been playing violin since ever, and I'm just like, you know, learning. I just started learning it this year, and in the past, similar things have happened. However, she has kind of proved it to herself that she can do the hard work, and she can, you know, she can stay in the process. Like, I'm not saying that she's the best, but so she has been doing okay, but I see this as a recurring pattern. So any advice that you have?
You know, she tried out for orchestra because you said she got in. So she tried out. So the competition was in the trying out. And she was
Yeah.
able to do that without a lot of anxiety, it sounds like.
Yes.
So I'm not sure it's competition that's the issue. I think
Okay.
I think it makes perfect sense that once you get into the orchestra and you're playing the violin and there are all these people who have been playing longer than you have, that you look at it and go, oh my goodness, I'm going to be humiliated on stage, right? I didn't understand what I was signing up for here. Wow, right? It's a totally reasonable human reaction. I don't think it's about competition exactly. I think fear of humiliation is one of the most profound human fears. And so she looks at it and she's like, I can't do what these other people are doing. The great news is she's done it before. She's had situations, you just said, where she has been able to rise to the occasion, and through, I assume, hard work and perseverance, she's practiced, she's learned the skills to be able to hold her head up and feel good about what she's able to do. So she needs to know. I mean, we've all had some version of the dream where you show up and you didn't study for the test, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we've all had some version of that. We've all been in life in situations where we're like, oh my goodness, I don't know this material. My violin playing is, not going to cut it. So she needs to know there's a plan. She needs to know that actually it's possible for her to hold her head up and do this. She wouldn't have been accepted into the orchestra if they didn't think she had the potential to learn to play well enough to be part of the orchestra. But that doesn't mean she doesn't have to do hard work. Of course she has to do hard work. So, she's 11. So she's at a great age to be able to coach her some yourself, but also encourage her to talk to whoever is in charge of the orchestra, the teacher who's leading them, and to say, I'm scared. I don't think I have the skill to play the violin well enough. I don't know how to learn these pieces fast enough. So hopefully that person will say, oh, it's a lot of work, but you can do this. I'm right here. Come in every lunchtime, do this. Every night you need to practice for 45 minutes, whatever they're going to tell her. And she needs a plan that you will help her to do, that it's going to sound a lot to her. It's going to sound a little overwhelming to her initially, but you can say to her, I know it sounds like a lot, 45 minutes of practice every night or whatever it's going to be, right? But you want it to keep this up forever. This is just to play catch up. And you'll see at every step of the way, you're going to get better and better. You're going to learn this, you're going to learn that, you're going to master this piece. And there should be, as with every goal, every single goal that's worth doing that people get anxious about, it's because it's a big goal. The only way to accomplish a big goal is to bite-sized piece it. It's got to be little pieces. So she has to see it as, even if you help her, where you put it on a computer with her, and day 1 is she does this, day 2 she learns this, day 3 she starts that piece. Whatever is a reasonable amount to do can be overhauled, it can be revised, but basically that she sees in the first month, I'm going to do these things, and she can not only do that with you, but she can go over it with the orchestra teacher so that that they are supporting her to do this. And you can help her stay on track with it, and you can celebrate every single step of the way. I mean, like, it should be after she practices every single day, there should be something that feels like a reward. And I don't mean, that she has to have a dessert every day, or, certainly not something you would buy her, but more like a celebration. Woohoo, you did it. Let's have a dance party or something, right? That every day feels like I did this hard thing. And I'm celebrating it every day. She'll see herself get closer and closer, which is, this is just it's a great opportunity for her to learn this, and a great thing for all of us to know how to do this with our kids when they have a big goal, because, big goals, we all are going to hopefully have lots of goals in life that are big goals. And the only way we're going to be able to do those big goals is what I've just described, which is to chunk it into manageable bite-sized pieces.
Okay. And can I also add that, like, I've seen this as a pattern. So we go through these steps. For example, in math, she wanted to achieve an A. So her journey from a B to an A, like, we did some of these steps where, we broke it down into like smaller chunks of things. But I've seen this mentality or a thought process show up again and again, and I'm telling myself that this is just part of her growing up, and, like, with enough evidence, with enough goals under her belt, she will be able to outgrow it. Is that can I say that to myself? Or
Well, so she's your oldest, right? So the
Yes.
oldest child often has this, some version of this.
Okay.
Oldest children, unfortunately, most of us don't know when they're toddlers, that when we say, oh, you're so smart, and oh, he can do anything, and oh, we put a lot of pressure on our children, but especially usually the firstborn. And they get the full brunt of the parents' neuroses. And we all want our kids to perform and show us in a good light. And it's work we have to do on ourselves, right? But often kids they feel this pressure to excel, to be the A student, to get into the orchestra, to whatever. And I'm not saying it's bad to want to be an A student or get into the orchestra. I think that's great. I think sometimes they feel that if they tried something like that and failed, they would disappoint us. So I think it's really important that we notice any way that we pressure them, any way that they could feel that they were disappointing us. One thing we can say is, like, if they're trying out for an orchestra, for instance, we could say, and this wasn't her issue, but sometimes kids are like, I don't want to try out. And we could say, if you try out, you might get in, you might not. It's not the end of the world if you don't get in. If you got in, what would it be like? If you didn't get in, what would it be like? What would your takeaway be? Your takeaway is not you're a worthless human being and you've disappointed your parents. Your takeaway is my skills are not yet at a level where the orchestra leader thought that I would be able to play the violin in the orchestra. But if I decided that I wanted to be in the orchestra, I just need a plan to practice. Just like the A in math, right? I'm going to try this. And what's the worst case scenario? Next time I get a B again, I'm going to redouble my efforts, right? It never has to signify that there's anything bad or wrong. It signifies I didn't really work at this the way I would need to achieve that goal. That's all. And I think once we get our own expectations cleaned up, often we see our children have less baggage around it. So I would work on that. And I would also just notice that part of you that just asked me the follow-up question of, do I have to worry about this? Is she always going to be like this? No, she's not always going to be like this, but clean up you first. And then you'll see that the amazing thing that I've noticed over and over again about parents and children is that we bring baggage to raising them. And when they're growing up and we notice any place that triggers us, and this is a little trigger for you, when we see that, we can go, oh, look how important it is to me that she achieve. I wonder how much of this is me. Let me work on that for me. I'm good enough the way I am, no matter what my parents thought, number one. And number two, I'm good enough the way I am, no matter what my children do. As an example of something to clean up, there's all kinds of things we clean up. I was talking to another mom who was never allowed to be angry. And so it scares her when her kid gets angry, right? Once we clean up our own stuff about anger, our kids, guess what? Their explosive tempers sometimes aren't so explosive anymore. So when we clean us up, we do see them change. And the particular thing you're asking about, which is about achievement and fear of not measuring up, I think we unwittingly so often put on our kids without even knowing. And I'm not judging you. I think every one of us has to just look at how much am I bringing to this need for my child to be a high achiever, because we all have that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I think that we don't have any other hands up. I wanted to say that we have moved on from our last spotlight. We're in our self-regulation spotlight now in the membership. And so there's a challenge. The challenge is respectful voice. So if you if this is an issue for you, meaning your voice, some parents say to me, I don't yell, I don't shout, but I know my voice is not always as respectful as I would like it to be, certainly not at bedtime or when we're trying to get out the door in the morning or when it's the siblings are fighting. So just if your voice is as respectful as possible all the time, if you feel good about it, great, you're done with that. Yay, give yourself a check, give yourself celebration. But if this is something that you would like to work on, this is a great opportunity. We'll be supporting you in the membership print out the respectful voice chart, remember to listen to the audio. There's a printout with instructions that make it easier to talk to your child about it. There's also an audio, and the audio deals with things like, parents who say, look, I tried the respectful voice chart, it didn't work, here's why. So it deals with the most common things I've heard from parents about why the respectful voice chart didn't work for them. So this is my challenge to you, is to work with the respectful voice chart and get your habits solid as we go into the new year. Thank you, Heidi. I'm glad you liked that audio. And Candace, I'm being asked here by Ish. It's just asking, Candace, is there time for another question? We do have time for one more question, so I'd be happy to take a question. Sorry, I'm looking for Ish.
Hi there. Hi,
I don't
Dr.
see-
Laura.
Hi. Hi.
Hi. I have a question around regular cleanup routines in the house. I
Okay.
have two kids, 8 and 5 years old, and both my kids are being homeschooled, and I work from home. I'm a full-time working parent. My husband works outside of the house, so he's gone most of the day. Now, because my kids are homeschooled, obviously, with all of the play and the books and anything that they're doing, the house is always a mess. But I am someone who finds it hard to not necessarily keep my calm, but I guess my thoughts are kind of all over the place if the house is too much messy, too much disorganized. And my kids obviously don't seem to mind it. And they would continue, playing. So, for example, both my kids love Lego. So if every single day they're playing with Lego, and they love reading books. So if they pick out 5 books from their shelf, they'll go sit on the couch. They'll leave those 5 there when they're reading, pick another 5 the next time, pick another 5 or whatever. So my younger one loves books more, and her books are, smaller, a short story. So she'll definitely end up actually having 50 books by the end of 2 days near the couch. And sometimes they're on the floor, sometimes they're on the dining table, and same with Lego. And I've tried a lot of different things, but I'm not sure if anything is really working. We've talked about how we can, when we go to get the next set of books, we put the other ones back. But obviously when they're in the mood, they don't necessarily know what they're going to be picking out, the next item that they're going to be, enjoying. So they probably just go in the room and, oh, I'm in the mood to now read a book, or that book caught my attention, so I'm going to pick and go and sit on the couch and read it. But, they won't put the other ones back, or they won't clean up. And by the time I'm done at 5:30, I come downstairs and the house looks like it's a pig pen. And it's like, oh my God, I have to make dinner. I have to make sure the kids are ready for bedtime. We're on time, sort of, and then there's a huge mess. And if I want their help to clean
Ish,
up,
can
or
I
ask
ask you a
them to clean
question?
up.
Ish,
Sorry.
did I miss this? How old are your kids?
8 and 5.
8 and 5. Okay. So they're certainly old enough to clean up
Oh, yes.
if they have a grown-up with them, clean up with them. Now, who's with them while you're upstairs?
Well, our mom lives with us, and
Okay.
I'm not entirely upstairs, the whole 9 hours. I'm up and downstairs. Like I see them probably 5 to 10 times in the day already.
Okay,
Still do.
great.
So
Great.
my work isn't like I have to stick to the computer the whole time.
Okay, great. So let me
but
ask you this. Is there a specific time of the day? Should be more than one, but is there any one specific time of the day where cleanup is the activity that is done with the kids?
Not at the moment. It used to be before. We used to have like a robot vacuum, and that was the big help. We used to say, oh, he's going to go off on schedule at 8 p.m. So we better pick up everything. Otherwise, he'll grab your Lego, or he'll grab, other things around. So that worked very, very well until the vacuum broke.
Okay. So what you want to do is you want to mimic that. It doesn't have to be the vacuum. You don't have to have a robot vacuum to do it. You can
Yeah.
play robot vacuum without a vacuum, you can play robot cleaners. The point is that you're not, unless somebody's with the 8-year-old and the 5-year-old who has a motivation to do
Yeah.
this, right? You know, if grandma doesn't care whether they put the books away, you know, if she's doing something else when they go off and come back
Mhm.
with more books, she's not going to help them put those books away at that point. So somebody needs to have, so you basically, you have two choices. You can throughout the day get them in the routine of, as soon as they're done with those books, before they leave the couch, they take those books with them and put them away, and they can get new books. That's a very hard thing to train kids to do, because it
Yeah.
takes an adult being with them over and over and over throughout the day. The minute they're getting off that couch, the adult is
Yeah.
saying, oh, let's grab the books. Let's do it. We always put our books away as soon as we're done with them. Books are precious. We don't want them to be somebody to come and sit on them. And so if grandma could do that all day, that would work. But it sounds to me like grandma's not really interested in doing that, or it would have, some version of that would have happened. So the other option,
She does remind them a lot. So she will kind of guide them through, you know, little things like that, and remind them, you know what, mom
working though,
would
right?
like
So
to
far.
see, but they don't listen.
Right.
They
Ish.
used to when
It's
they were
not
little.
working. It's not that they don't listen. It's not, what she's doing is not effective,
Yeah.
right? What she's doing is actually not working. So what's happening isn't working. You keep doing that, you'll get the same results you're getting. If you do something different, you'll get different results. So I'm not saying tell her not to remind them. Of course she should remind them. However, we know that's not going to be effective. And every day when you're done with your work day and you come down at 5:30, there's going to be a mess. And at that point, you pick each of your kids up. Well, you're probably not picking the 8-year-old up. You're giving your 8-year-old a hug. You're twirling your 5-year-old around. And you're saying, cleanup song. The cleanup song goes on, and you spend the next 20 minutes, all of you, cleaning up together. If grandma doesn't want to be part of it, she can exempt herself. She's been on
Yeah.
all day. But you are cleaning up with the kids. This is your reunion activity, and you make it really fun. And there has to be a place for everything, like the Legos.
Yeah.
If they've just been building with Legos, it might be that Legos are in the corner of the room that's sort of shielded, that the Legos stay over there. I mean, like,
Yeah.
to me, you know, if my son was that age and playing with blocks and building things, I wasn't cleaning them up every time, every night. I was allowing him to keep the blocks up, right? But once a week, we'd have to take the whole thing down. As a for instance, you might do something like that with the Legos, or you might just like toss it all back into the big Lego bin, whatever is the thing to do for you. But everything has to have a place where it goes that they know, and you do it with them every day at 5:30. And I know you feel under time pressure to get them fed and bathed and into bed, but the cleanup actually is an important thing for them to learn. And there's no reason you can't do it and have it be fun and bond with them. But they're not going to do it because they get reminded and told to. The only way they're going to do it is when it's part of their relationship with you, and you're offering them that connection while they build this habit.
Okay. And what if, you know, I come downstairs and they're busy building, and I can imagine they would say, no, I'm reading a book, or no, I'm building this. I'm not
That's
going to
not
do it
what
right now.
they're not allowed to decide the schedule in your home. The
Okay.
schedule in your home allows them plenty of time for free play, I hope. And if
Yeah.
not, make sure it does.
Certainly.
And I would have a schedule actually written out that shows them the time of day, and that shows a picture of what they're able to do with those times of day. I mean, they're homeschooled, so I assume you have some sort of a schedule. And so, you know, and when it's bedtime, it's bedtime. When it's supper time and everyone sits down together, it's supper time. They're not going to say,
That's
oh, but I'm
true.
busy reading a book. They're going to come to supper, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so that's the same thing. This is cleanup time.
Okay. I think that's a great idea. I mean, if 5:30 is cleanup time, no matter what.
No matter what. And think of it the way you would if you were a preschool teacher. The kids are playing. They're having a great time in preschool. Some of them are building, some of them are reading, some of them are chasing each other around the room. It doesn't matter. This cleanup song goes on. We do this, and then we move into the next activity. The next activity in your case might be getting ready for dinner or whatever. But
Yeah.
this is what we do when I come in. I connect with you and we clean up together.
Okay, that's a wonderful idea. I think just hearing it out loud from you makes it sound like, yes, I can do that. Thank you.
Good luck. Good luck. The most important thing is just to have fun with it. They won't
Yeah.
like it if it's not a fun thing.
I think I haven't seen it from that perspective. I come downstairs and obviously there's a huge mess and I just get triggered by that and I see myself getting triggered and not actually noticing the things that they've done. Instead of I focus on the mess, which is not what I want to do.
Beautiful. So what a great insight, right? To see how you can move you, and as
Yeah.
you out of the frustrated, victimized, resentful place into a connecting, fun, appreciative place. As you
Yeah.
make that transition, they're going to follow you emotionally, because we're always the emotional leader.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thanks again.
Okay, so we're at the end of our office hours. We have an unusual thing coming up, which is that after self-regulation, our new spotlight after self-regulation, a few weeks, is going to be more parenting kids who need more. And we haven't done the spotlight before. And we're going to kick it off with a workshop where we're going to do questions like this, but specifically about more. Like it could be kids who are highly sensitive. It could be kids who are neurodivergent. It could be kids who have sensory issues. And we're going to talk about how you use these peaceful parenting practices when you have the challenge of a kid who, struggles with ADHD, for instance, or whatever. So we'll see how this works. And I'm excited to be able to do this new spotlight with you. So you'll be getting information from me in our Friday emails that I always send you. And also it'll be on the page. It probably is already up, but if not, we'll get it up very soon for this workshop that's going to happen in the beginning of February. And then our next office hours will not be till the end of February. So have a great month, and I will see you soon. And Happy New Year. Say
Thank
goodbye
you.
to
Thank
unmute
you.
yourselves and say goodbye to each other.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for your questions.